Forward Thinking in Review, Week 21, World. New York Times, Grade A. ISIS leader takes steps to ensure group survival. The Islamic State's leadership under Mr. Baghdadi has drawn mainly from two pools: veterans of al-Qaeda in Iraq and former Ba'athist officers under Saddam Hussein. ISIS has formed a structure that can survive the losses of leaders by giving mid-level commanders a degree of autonomy. Islamic State's strict secrecy, which has allowed its leadership to remain so mysterious, has led to some differences among American and other Western analysts. From the Washington Post, Grade A-. Despite nuclear deal, US and Iran locked in a regional shadow war. The United States and Iran continued moving weapons, money, and fighters across the Middle East in an interrupted shadow war. Thousands of Iran-backed Hezbollah militants are fighting alongside Syrian forces, and Assad recently ratified a $1 billion line of credit from Tehran. Defending the deal, American officials have pointed to plans to extend the UN embargo on arms sales to Iran. From the New York Times, Grade B+. Route of migrants into Europe shifts towards Balkans. Migrants are now pushing by land across the Western Balkans, causing a sharp rise in anti-immigrant sentiment. 79,000 migrants crossed illegally into Greece from Turkey in 2015. The sea route from Libya to Italy, along the most popular path, also had about 67,000 illegal crossings. Messages directed at the migrants warned them to abide by local laws, to respect Hungarian culture, and to not try to take Hungarian jobs. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B+. Germany seeks foreign cure for its doctor shortage. The number of foreign doctors in Germany rose 57% in the 5 years to 2014. Its healthcare needs are growing rapidly, thanks in part to a population in which 28.8% are 65 and older. Germany's share of foreign doctors is still small compared with other countries, such as the US and the UK, where roughly a quarter of doctors are foreign nationals or have been trained, and in France, where it's 19%. From the New York Times, Grade B. BBC, a target of conservatives, faces a review of its mission. The BBC, which is currently financed by an annual payment of £145.50 or $227.50 from nearly every household, is up for its 10-year charter review next year. Critics believe that Auntie, as the BBC is sometimes affectionately known, should stick to her knitting: documentaries, Middleborough, programming, objective broadcast news. U.S. From the New York Times, Grade B+. Critics of solitary confinement are buoyed as Obama. An estimated 75,000 state and federal prisoners are held in solitary confinement in the United States, and for the first time in generation, leaders are rethinking the practice. It is designed to break a man's will to live. Solitary confinement exasperates mental illness, and that even stable people held in isolation report experiencing psychiatric symptoms, including anxiety, depression, anger, self-cutting, or other acts of self-harm. When they get out, they are broken. This is a permanent damage. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B+. Cost of police misconduct cases soars in big U.S. cities. The cost of resolving police misconduct cases has surged for big U.S. cities, up 48% from $168.3 million in 2010. The costless claims were alleged of civil rights violations and other misconduct, followed by payouts on car collisions involving the police. Taxpayers foot the bill for settlements one way or another. From The Economist, Grade B. A Way of Seeing Wages, and 2016. There are 6.4 million Americans in part-time jobs who want to work full-time. up from 4.5 million on the eve of the recession. A 4-year college course is unnecessary for many students and too expensive for workers looking for new skills. Boosting skills and productivity is necessary to increase wages. A much higher minimum wage would boost median incomes because many low-wage workers are their household second earners. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B. Los Angeles garment industry frets about high pay hike. The city's wage law, which will raise the base pay by 50% over 50 years, serves as a test for urban minimum wages. The Los Angeles metro area employs twice as many manufacturing workers as the city of Chicago or Detroit. City Council found that a minimum wage increase to $15.25 an hour would result in a raise for more than 600,000 workers while costing the city fewer than 3,500 jobs. Business and Economy from the Wall Street Journal, Grade A-. Congress eyes sales from nation's oil stockpile for highway fund. The sale of crude from the reserves is one of about 15 new funding sources that Senate leaders want to use to offset the cost of $47.1 billion multi-year reauthorization of the highway program. U.S. oil production has increased 87% since 2007 to 9.7 million barrels a day. The new output has prompted some lawmakers strapped for funding sources to argue that the government could reduce the reserves while maintaining enough oil to safeguard against an emergency. Any sales from the reserves could weigh on oil prices. From Barron's, Grade B+, Iran can't just open oil spigot. Iran ranks 4th in the world in energy reserves, but has fallen sharply as a producer, generating 2.77 million barrels. That's down from 3.63 million barrels in 2011 and from the record 6.6 million barrels in 1979. The National Iranian Oil Company won't be able to bring more than 500,000 barrels a day back online within 6 months after sanctions relief. Total was Iran's best friend in the West, signing on to pour billions into enormous offshore South Pars gas field until politics forced it to withdraw years later. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B+. Unlucky emerging markets don't get lift from weak currency. These countries, especially those reliant on export-led growth models, are being forced to adjust to weak external demand, low commodity prices, and a rebalancing in China. Central banks in some emerging market countries would need to take a more aggressive stance. Interest rates adjusted for inflation are hovering around the highest level in 15 years in emerging market countries. The weakness in these economies has highlighted the long-standing need for overhauls. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B+. Toxic loans wallop French towns. A loan pegged to the Swiss franc that municipal officials took out years had become so burdensome. Now, with the euro having sunk after long enjoying a higher valuation versus the franc, scores of municipalities across France have come to rue the day they accepted the offers. The euro's value against the Swiss franc was at 1.05 francs per euro Monday from 1.65 in September. From the Financial Times, Grade B. Crude supertanker operators cash in on oil market rout. The cost of hiring a VLCC has jumped more than 50%, rising to $93,600 a day, a 7-year seasonal high. West African oil used to be sold into U.S. Atlantic coast. That was a 5,000-mile voyage. Now it is being sold in Asia Pacific region, a 10,000-mile voyage. Banks will put up the money for only 60% of new built $100 million VLCs for a strong counterparty. 10 years ago, the figure was 85%. From the Financial Times, Grade B. UAE drops fuel subsidies to boost finances and cut emissions. Subsidies in the UAE amount to $7 billion a year and are a part of a package of energy subsidies that total $29 billion or 6.6% of GDP. The UAE's move is the latest step governments have taken to cut fossil fuel subsidies that totaled $548 billion in 2013 in emerging and developing economies alone. India, Indonesia, Mexico, and Egypt are among those that have started energy subsidy reform. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B. In Thailand, everyone digs the idea of a canal, but it never happens. Dig, dig, dig. It's all anyone wants to talk about. The problem is mainly the number of proposed routes, which has hit 13, with the price estimates ranging from 20 billion to 30 billion. For China, analysts say, it potentially provides the security of opening another channel to the Indian Ocean and the Middle East instead of the congestion and pirates clogging the Strait of Malacca. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B. Thai turns for Greece's shipping industry. Shipping industry is coming under increasing pressure to carry more of the load. It employs more than 200,000 people and contributes around 7.5% of Greece's GDP. Shipping is one of the few areas in Greece that is still hiring at good wages, in a country where overall unemployment tops 25%. The industry paid tonnage taxes of more than 100 million euros annually. Finance and corporations. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade A-. Time to buy Japan's blue chips. Companies in the Nikkei stock index turned just a nickel of each revenue dollar into operating profit, versus more than 14 cents for companies in the S&P 500. Rising pressure from government, investors, and peers is forcing many of Japan's longtime underperformers to discard weak businesses, diversify their boards, and put cash to work, especially through dividends and buybacks. Companies with returns on equity below 5% are quickly attracting the scorn of both institutional investors and advisory services. From the Financial Times, Grade B. Companies rush to sell debt before August break. U.S. companies are rushing to lock in low rates before the Federal Reserve possibly starts raising borrowing costs. In July, $88 billion of new investment-grade debt has been sold in the dollar market. The wave of supply has weighed on the market, and the average yield of 5.24% for BAA-rated dollar debt stands at the highest level since the start of 2014, and is up from a low of 4.29% in January. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade B. Hedge funds gear up for another big short. Liquid alternative funds managed a cumulative $446 billion according to fund tracker Lipper, up from $83 billion at the start of 2009. The moves resemble efforts by some hedge funds to find a way to wager against the U.S. housing market ahead of the financial crisis. Liquid alternatives funds have emerged as one of the hottest products in finance, fueled by a promise to deliver hedge fund-style investing to the masses. Hedge funds' pessimistic outlook is still unproven, as bond markets remain stable by historical standards. Marketplace. From the New York Times, Grade A. A light bulb goes on over the mall. LEDs have proved attractive as cities and businesses look to replace aging energy-guzzling fixtures with lights that can not only turn on and off automatically, but receive and transmit data about their own status as well as their surroundings. Some 20,000 poles, lights that can communicate with the Sensity network. Cities worldwide are expected to replace 50 million aging fixtures with LEDs over the next few years. From the Wall Street Journal, Grade A-. Condos left behind in housing rebound. Condo construction has been slammed by tough rules on condo mortgages enacted after the housing bust as well as stronger demand among young people for rentals and tight lending conditions for builders. First-time home buyers will account for just 18% of new home purchases this year, well below the 27% rated logged in the more normal market of 2001 to 2003. A developer based in Miami said he can get construction loan for roughly 75% of the cost of a building an apartment complex, but lenders will cover only 50% on average of a condo's complex cost because of the greater risk. From the Washington Post, grade B+. Walmart's self-interested shot at reviving the American factory. Walmart is trying to revive the U.S. manufacturing base. The company is 2 years into a 10-year plan to buy $250 billion more in products from American factories. Average wages in China, which were 17.5% of U.S. wages in 2000, are now 61% of U.S. wages. It is not easy to rebuild a supplier ecosystem that was dismantled as production moved overseas, making components such as ball bearings and circuit boards nearly impossible to source domestically. From the Wall Street Journal, grade B+. Doctors object to higher cancer drug prices. Critics from doctors to insurers to state Medicaid officials have voiced alarm about prescription drug prices, which rose more than 12% last year in the U.S. The doctors also proposed changing U.S. law to allow patients to import cancer drugs for personal use from other countries, including Canada. Reforming the patent system to make it more difficult to prolong exclusivity. Others have called for pharmaceutical industry to justify rising prices by disclosing more of its R&D and manufacturing costs.